When a funding cut by the Trump administration threatened to shutter their Veterans Support Center, two old soldiers on opposite sides of the political divide found their bitter feud unexpectedly arbitrated by Barack Obama, forcing them to confront what truly unites them. Within hours, the raw, emotional footage from a small Pennsylvania news station became an internet phenomenon. The clip wasn't slick or produced. It was just two men, their faces etched with the harsh lines of conviction and regret, arguing in the faded light of a VFW hall. The video spread from local Facebook groups to national news aggregators, presented under headlines that read, "Two veterans, one country, no middle ground." It became a flashpoint, a 2-minute encapsulation of a nation's fractured soul, setting in motion a series of events that would reach the desks of two presidents and force a reckoning in the one place they never expected, their own small, forgotten town. A week before the cameras arrived, the news came not with a bang, but with the crinkle of an official envelope. Frank Kowalski, a man whose posture was still as rigid as it was in his Marine uniform 30 years ago, slid it open with a pocket knife. He ran a thick, calloused finger down the page, his eyes scanning the bureaucratic jargon. He stopped at the operative phrase, "Cessation of funding for grant program 7B Alpha, designated for peer-to-peer counseling initiatives." He grunted, a sound of grim acceptance. He folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt pocket. Tough choices. That's what he'd voted for. That's what President Trump was doing, cutting the fat, making the hard calls nobody else wanted to. This was just part of it. He found Marcus Cole in the back room, meticulously cleaning the coffee machine. Marcus, Army to Frank's Marines, moved with a quiet deliberation that Frank sometimes mistook for weakness. They had started this center, the Allegheny Veterans Outpost, a decade ago, with bake sale money and a dream. Now it ran on a shoestring budget, and this one, single federal grant that paid for the counselors' certifications, the outreach materials, and the gas cards they gave to vets who couldn't afford the drive from deep in the mountains. "Got the letter," Frank said, leaning against the doorframe. Marcus didn't look up. He just kept wiping down the stainless steel carafe. "I figured it was coming." "It's a line item in a budget the size of the ocean, Marcus. Trump's got to drain the swamp. It means some things get caught in the drain," Frank explained, his tone more forceful than he intended. Marcus finally stopped, his hands still. He looked at Frank, and for a second, the years of political arguments melted away, leaving only the two young men who'd met at a VFW convention long ago, bonding over shared memories of a desert they both tried to forget. "You call Leo Pineda fat? Or that kid, what's his name? The one from the 101st? Just back from Syria? The one whose wife just left him? Is he the swamp we're draining?" "That's not what I mean, and you know it," Frank shot back, his defensiveness rising. "The program was flagged as inefficient. It says so right there. We don't have the numbers, the metrics. We don't look good on a spreadsheet in D.C. "We don't look good on a spreadsheet?" Marcus's voice, usually so calm, began to climb. "We look good in that chair, Frank. The one right out there where we sat with Sergeant Miller's kid for 6 hours, until he agreed to go to the VA hospital instead of eating a bullet. That's our metric. How many men are still breathing because they had a place to come where someone understood?" "And we'll still be here," Frank insisted, taking a step into the room. "We'll do more bake sales. A car wash. We'll figure it out. We're Marines. We're soldiers. We adapt." "We are not soldiers anymore, Frank. We are two old men running on fumes." Marcus threw the cleaning rag into the sink. "And that grant was our fuel. Your guy, the one you cheer for on TV, he just siphoned our tank." "For what? To save a rounding error in his budget? He called it wasteful spending. He's calling what we do a waste. He's trying to fix the whole country, not just our little corner of it." "This little corner is all we have. It's all Leo Pineda has. What am I supposed to tell them, Frank? Sorry, the spreadsheets didn't approve of us saving your life this quarter?" The argument went nowhere, a familiar dance of frustration and resentment. It ended, as it always did, with Frank retreating to his ideology, and Marcus to his wounded silence. Their friendship, once forged in the common language of service, was now dying by 1,000 political cuts. The center they had built to heal others was being torn apart by the same sickness infecting the country. They didn't speak for the rest of the day. The silence in the VFW hall louder than any bomb. It was in that heavy silence that Brenda Finney, a reporter from the local paper who also ran its online video channel, called. She'd heard a rumor about the grant. She wanted to do a story, a human interest piece. Frank, seeing a chance to defend the president's tough choices, agreed. Marcus, seeing a final, desperate chance to show the world what was being lost, also agreed. Neither of them knew they were about to light a match. Brenda Finney arrived with a single cameraman, a young man named Kevin who looked barely old enough to vote. She set up in the main hall of the VFW Post, a room that smelled of stale beer, old wood, and quiet patriotism. The walls were covered in framed photos of local boys who had served, some smiling in uniform, others captured in the stark black and white of a memorial portrait. Brenda was a pro. She knew her town, and she knew these men. She wanted to tell a story of a community resource at risk. She had no idea she was about to document a civil war in miniature. She started gently. "Frank, Marcus, thank you for speaking with me. Can you tell me what this center means to this community?" Marcus spoke first, his voice measured. "It's a place to land," he said, looking at the camera with an unnerving stillness. "When you get out, the world, it doesn't speak your language anymore. We speak the language. There's no judgment, just a cup of coffee and someone who gets it. For some of our guys, it's the only place they have." Brenda nodded, turning to Frank. "And Frank, you co-founded this with Marcus. You built this from the ground up." "Damn right," Frank said, crossing his arms. His red, "Make America Great Again" hat sat on the table beside him. "We saw a need. We filled it. That's what Americans do. We don't wait for a handout." Brenda sensed the tension immediately. "The federal grant you've been receiving has been a big part of your operations. Now, that funding has been eliminated. Frank, your party is in charge. How do you square this decision with the work you do here?" Frank leaned forward, his eyes boring into the camera lens, as if addressing the president himself. "Leadership is about making hard choices," he began, his voice a low rumble. "Our country is trillions of dollars in debt. President Trump promised to cut wasteful spending, to get our house in order. This grant, along with hundreds of others, was identified as inefficient. It's a tough pill to swallow. But if it helps fix the country in the long run, we have to swallow it. We have to be strong." The cameraman, Kevin, instinctively zoomed in on Marcus's face. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Brenda saw it. "Marcus," she prompted softly, "do you see this program as inefficient?" Marcus let out a short, bitter laugh. "Inefficient," he repeated, shaking his head. "Last Tuesday, a young man who served 2 tours in Afghanistan sat in that chair right there. He hadn't slept in 3 days. He was hearing things, seeing things. His hands were shaking so bad he couldn't sign his own name. We don't have a government form for that. We have Carl, our counselor, who sat with him for hours. We drove him to the VA and sat with him in the waiting room. We talked to his wife. We got him help. Was that inefficient, Frank? Should we have given him a pamphlet to improve our metrics? That's one person, Marcus. You can't run a country based on one anecdote." Frank's voice rose, his face flushing. "The system is broken. Trump is trying to fix the whole damn system." "He's not fixing it. He's breaking it further," Marcus retorted, now on his feet. "He's breaking the parts that actually work. This place works. It doesn't work on a balance sheet. It works in here." He jabbed a finger at his heart. It works because we're here, day after day, picking up the pieces the government doesn't want to deal with. And now the little help we got, the pittance they gave us to keep the lights on, is gone. Because your guy thinks we're wasteful. He doesn't think we're wasteful. He thinks the program is wasteful. It's about the principle," Frank shouted, standing up to meet him. "The principle? What principle is that? That it's better to let a man fall apart than to spend a few dollars helping him stand up? Is that the new American principle? The principle is self-reliance, not depending on the government for everything." We're not depending on them. We were partnering with them. And it's not the government, Frank. It's our tax dollars. It's our money. Money we earned. Brenda tried to interject. Gentlemen, maybe we can. No, but it was too late. The dam had broken. You voted for this, Marcus accused, his voice cracking with a pain that went far beyond politics. You knew this was his platform. You cheered when he said he was going to slash and burn. Did you think we'd be immune? That he'd spare us because we're good guys? I voted for a stronger country. I voted for a president who isn't afraid to be unpopular to do what's right, Frank shot back. Unlike your guy who just wrote checks to everyone to make them happy, my guy signed the bill that created this grant program in the first place. A handout. A hand up. There's a difference, Frank, but you're too blinded by your damn hat to see it. Frank recoiled as if struck. He looked at the red hat on the table, then back at Marcus. The anger in his eyes was suddenly replaced by a deep, profound hurt. My hat? This is what it's about? You hate me because of my hat? I don't hate you, Frank, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The fight was gone, replaced by an ocean of exhaustion. I don't recognize you anymore. The man I served with, the man who helped me build this place, he knew our mission was to leave no one behind, not to check their voting registration first. Marcus turned and walked away from the camera, from Brenda, from Frank, him. He went into the small office and quietly shut the door. The click of the latch echoed in the cavernous hall. Frank stood alone in the frame, his shoulders slumped. He looked at the camera, then at the closed door, then down at his hands. He seemed to shrink before their eyes, the righteous anger deflated, leaving only a confused and wounded old soldier. We'll figure it out, he stammered, not to Brenda but to the closed door. We always do. Brenda gestured for Kevin to cut the camera. The silence that followed was absolute. The interview was over. Brenda knew she had something powerful, something that transcended a local budget cut story. She captured the precise moment a friendship broke. As she packed her gear, she had a feeling that the consequences of these few minutes were just beginning. She uploaded the raw, unedited 8-minute clip to the paper's website that evening with the simple title, Argument over VA Grant Cuts Threatens Future of Local Veterans Center. By morning, it would have 1 million views. The internet, as it is designed to do, took the spark of Brenda Finney's clip and turned it into a wildfire. It moved at the speed of outrage. By midnight, it was being dissected on cable news. One network framed it as a heroic local man, Marcus Cole, standing up to the heartless policies of the Trump administration. Another network portrayed a beleaguered patriot, Frank Kowalski, struggling to defend common-sense fiscal conservatism against liberal emotionalism. The clip was sliced, diced, and repurposed. Memes were made. Frank's red hat became a symbol of either loyalty or blindness. Marcus's pained expression became the face of a betrayed America. The actual point of the interview, the imminent closure of a small-town veterans center, was almost entirely lost in the political crossfire. Frank and Marcus were no longer men. They were avatars in a national proxy war, their decades of friendship reduced to a trending topic. In Washington, D.C., in an office that valued quiet deliberation over loud proclamation, Barack Obama was preparing to leave for the day. His public life had settled into a steady rhythm of foundation work, speaking engagements, and the careful curation of his legacy. He did not, as a rule, engage in the daily political squabbles. It was a rule he was about to break. His senior aide, a sharp, empathetic woman named Amelia Vance, hesitated at his door. "Sir, I think you should see this," she said, holding a tablet. It's complicated." Obama took the tablet. He stood by the large window overlooking the city, the Washington Monument a pale spear in the twilight, and pressed play. He watched the entire 8-minute clip without a word. He saw Brenda Finney's earnest setup. He listened to Marcus's quiet dignity and Frank's gruff defensiveness. His face remained impassive, a mask of neutrality he had perfected over 8 years in the world's most scrutinized job. But Amelia, who had worked with him for years, saw the subtle tells. the slight tightening of his jaw as Marcus described the young veteran shaking in the chair, the flicker of something, not anger, but a deep, resonant sorrow. When Marcus told Frank, "I don't recognize you anymore." He finished the video and handed the tablet back to Amelia. He was silent for a full minute, his gaze distant. "He called the program inefficient and wasteful," Amelia offered, providing the political context. The White House press secretary defended the cut this afternoon. President Trump retweeted the clip of Frank defending him. Obama waved a hand, dismissing the noise. "The politics of it don't matter," he said, his voice low. "They built that place together, Frank and Marcus. That's the part that matters. They had a shared mission." He turned from the window. "What was the grant? The one they're talking about?" 7B Alpha. It was part of the Veteran Support Act of 2012, Amelia replied, already having the information ready. It was designed specifically for peer-to-peer programs in underserved areas. Small grants, high impact, but hard to quantify in traditional ways, which is why it was an easy target for budget cuts. "Hard to quantify," Obama repeated softly. He looked at Amelia. "Find out everything you can about the Allegheny Veterans Outpost. I want to know about their work. I want to know about the men they help. And I want to know exactly how much that grant was for." "And then, sir?" Amelia asked. "Then we're going to make it right," he said. But quietly. No press releases. No statements. This isn't about us. It isn't about Trump. This is about their mission. We're not going to turn their work into a political football. He paused, a look of resolve hardening his features. We're going to give them their mission back. Back in Pennsylvania, Frank Kowalski was living in a private hell. His phone had become a weapon aimed at him. Texts from his golf buddies and fellow local Republican committee members ranged from confused to furious. "What the hell, Frank? You made us look weak. Couldn't you have just defended the president? You look like you were about to cry." Way to hand the libs a talking point. The local conservative talk radio host, a man Frank had admired for years, spent a full segment that afternoon dissecting the video. "And you have this fellow, Frank Kowalski, a good Marine, I'm sure, but he gets rolled by his liberal buddy. He lets the emotion get the better of him. Folks, this is the problem. We can't go soft. We have to be warriors." Warriors. Frank sat on an overturned bucket in his garage, the air smelling of oil and sawdust. He felt less like a warrior and more like a fool. He had wanted to stand for something, for the principles of strength and fiscal responsibility he believed in, but the movement he had championed had no room for nuance, no tolerance for a moment of televised heartache. They didn't see his conflict. They only saw his failure to dominate. He felt a rage building in his chest, a directionless anger at Marcus for pushing him, at the reporter for filming him, at the radio host for mocking him, and most of all, at himself for the pathetic, pleading look he'd had on his face when Marcus walked away. He picked up his old service rifle, the one he kept meticulously clean, and began to disassemble it on his workbench. The familiar, mechanical motions were the only thing that made sense. Click. Slide. Release. A problem he could actually fix. Marcus Cole, meanwhile, was drowning in a different kind of poison. His phone was ringing just as much as Frank's, but with offers. A producer from a major cable news network wanted to fly him to New York. A well-funded progressive PAC wanted him to be the face of a new ad campaign titled Trump's War on Vets. A dozen liberal commentators had tagged him on social media, praising his courageous stand. They were celebrating him, but it felt like a violation. They didn't see him. They saw a symbol, a tool to be wielded against their enemy. They didn't ask about the center, or about Leo Pineda, or about his broken friendship with Frank. They only wanted to bottle his pain and sell it. That evening, his wife, Eleanor, found him on the back porch, staring into the dark woods behind their house. She set a cup of tea on the railing beside him and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. "You should turn your phone off," she said softly. "It doesn't matter." "They're emailing me now," he sighed. "They want to make me a poster boy." He picked up the tea, his hand trembling slightly. "Ellie, they don't care. Not a single one of them has asked, 'How can we help the center?' They just ask, 'Can you say what you said on camera again, but for us this time?'" Because you spoke a truth that people are desperate to hear, Marcus. No, he said, shaking his head. I just showed them my anger, and now they want to own it. They're no different from Frank's side. They all just want a piece of the anger. Nobody wants to help build anything. They just want to tear things down. He looked at his wife, his eyes filled with a deep weariness. This was never about politics for me. It was about Frank. I saw my friend getting lost, and I pushed him. I wanted to shake him awake. And instead, I think I just broke the last thing we had left between us. A few days passed. The story, as all viral stories do, began to fade from the national conversation, replaced by the next cycle of outrage. But in 2 households in rural Pennsylvania, the silence it left behind was deafening. Frank and Marcus avoided each other, their shared space at the VFW hall now a no-man's land. The veterans who relied on the center felt the chill. The coffee wasn't on. The door was often locked. The landing place was gone. Then, on a quiet Friday afternoon, an email landed in both of their inboxes. It was from Brenda Finney. The subject line read, "An update on the Allegheny Veterans Outpost." Frank opened it with a sense of dread. Marcus opened it with a sense of resignation. The text was short and direct. "Gentlemen, I know the last week has been difficult, and I feel a measure of responsibility for the attention brought upon you both. I've been following up on the story, and I've been contacted by a representative from a private philanthropic foundation. I have been asked to inform you that an anonymous donor has agreed to cover the full amount of the federal grant for the next 2 years. The funds will be wired to the Outpost's account by the end of the month. No strings attached. Your center is saved." Frank read the words 3 times. Saved. An anonymous donor. He felt a wave of relief so powerful it made him dizzy. He thought of Marcus. They were saved. He felt a surge of hope, the first in a long time. Marcus felt the same relief, a loosening in his chest he didn't know was possible. 2 years. That was stability. That was life. They could keep the doors open. They could keep helping their men. But there was a second paragraph. The Foundation's director has also extended a personal invitation, the primary benefactor of the fund, that is making this donation. The man who, as president, originally signed the Veterans Support Act into law, would like to speak with you both. He has requested a private video conference call to take place this coming Monday. Frank's heart hammered against his ribs. The man who, as president, originally signed the act, his mind, which had been celebrating a victory, now reeled in confusion and a dawning, terrible sense of irony. Marcus stared at the screen, his breath caught in his throat. He knew instantly who it was. The man Frank blamed for every problem in the country. The man Marcus had just defended. At the bottom of the email was a calendar invitation for the video call. The organizer's name was listed simply. It was a name that had been a source of hope for one of them and a curse for the other for over a decade. Organizer Barack Obama. Frank Kowalski stared at the name, the blood draining from his face. He felt like the ground had just fallen away beneath him. Marcus Cole stared at the same name, a sense of profound, terrifying possibility washing over him. The anonymous donor was no longer anonymous, and their war, which they thought was over, was about to get a new and entirely unexpected arbitrator. The weekend leading up to the call was the longest of their lives. The news of the donation and its source had leaked. It created a strange new ripple in the media. This time, the narrative was harder to control. The most surprising take came from a place neither man expected. A widely read, deeply conservative military affairs blog, which had spent years criticizing the Obama presidency, published an editorial that stunned everyone. It didn't praise Obama, but it didn't attack him either. Instead, it turned its fire on the current administration and Congress. It should never have come to this, the author wrote. The well-being of our veterans is not a partisan issue. That a former president had to step in to fund a peer counseling program that the government itself deemed wasteful is a disgrace. While we fundamentally disagree with President Obama's politics, His actions in this single instance have highlighted a shameful failure by our current leaders. This isn't about Obama or Trump, it's about our national honor. The article acted as a circuit breaker. It reframed the story from a political soap opera into a question of duty. The unexpected ally wasn't a person, but a principle, suddenly given voice from the other side of the aisle. For Frank, it was a lifeline. It gave him permission to see the situation outside of strict party loyalty. For Marcus, it was a relief. It affirmed that the mission of the center was, and always had been, the most important thing. The noise quieted. All that was left was the call. On Monday, they met at the VFW hall. It was the first time they had been in the same room by choice in over a week. Frank had brewed coffee. He wordlessly handed a mug to Marcus. Marcus nodded his thanks. They didn't talk. There was nothing to say until they heard what he had to say. They sat side by side at the old desk in the back office, the laptop open between them, and clicked a link. The screen flickered, and then there he was. Barack Obama was in a simple office, bookshelves behind him, wearing a light blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He wasn't flanked by flags or aides. He looked, surprisingly, like just a man. He smiled, a calm, easy smile that seemed to suck the tension out of the room. "Frank, Marcus," he began, his voice exactly as it was on television, calm and melodic. "Thank you for taking the time. I imagine this is more than a little strange for both of you." Frank just grunted, unable to form words. Marcus managed a quiet, "Mr. President." "Please, call me Barack," he said. "I want to be clear about why I asked for this call. This has nothing to do with politics. I'm not here to score points. And I'm not here to criticize President Trump. I'm here because I saw your story, and I saw two men who are trying to uphold the most sacred promise we make as a country, that we will take care of our own." He looked at each of them in turn through the small camera lens. "I signed the act that created that grant program a long time ago. The idea wasn't just to send money from Washington. The idea was to empower people like you, people on the ground, in their communities, who know what's needed far better than any bureaucrat ever could. You too, and what you built at the Allegheny Veterans Outpost, you are the living embodiment of that idea. You are the mission." He leaned forward slightly. "I heard the words they used. Inefficient. Wasteful. Let me tell you something. Saving one life isn't inefficient. Rebuilding one family isn't a rounding error on a budget sheet. Giving someone a place to land when they are in a free fall, that is the best return on investment a nation can ever make. The work you do is the furthest thing from waste. It is essential." Frank felt a knot in his stomach begin to loosen. The words were a balm on a wound he didn't even know how deeply he felt. "But that's not really why I called," Obama continued, his tone shifting subtly. "The funding is simple. We took care of that. I called because of what I saw happen between the two of you." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Our country is tearing itself apart right now. People who were once neighbors, friends, even family, are looking at each other like enemies. I have lived with that division. I know what it costs." He looked directly at Frank. "Frank, I know you and I don't agree on much politically. I know you voted for a different vision for America. That is your right as a citizen, and I respect it." Then he looked at Marcus. "And Marcus, I know you fought to defend the work we tried to do. I appreciate that. But I saw the pain in both of your faces, and it was the same pain." He brought his hands together on his desk. "I watched your interview. The most powerful thing about it wasn't the argument. It was that you built that center together. Your service to each other, to your brothers and sisters in arms, is more important than your service to any party or any politician, including me. And especially including me." Frank finally looked up from the desk, his eyes meeting Marcus's for the first time during the call. "That center is a testament to a shared mission that is bigger than any political difference," Obama finished. "Don't let anyone, and I mean anyone, take that away from you. The country needs more places like yours." And it needs more men like you who remember how to build things together. Thank you for your continued service." He smiled one last time. "That's all I wanted to say. You take care of each other." And with a final nod, his image vanished from the screen, leaving the two veterans alone in the quiet office. The silence stretched on. It wasn't angry or awkward anymore. It was thoughtful. Heavy. Frank cleared his throat. "He was right about one thing," he said, his voice raspy. Marcus looked at him. "What's that?" "It is a good cup of coffee," Frank said, gesturing to the mug in Marcus's hand. A small smile touched Marcus's lips. "Yeah, Frank, it is." 3 weeks later, the Allegheny Veterans Outpost was alive again. The donation had come through, securing their future. But the real change was in the atmosphere. The invisible wall between Frank and Marcus was gone. They worked together, an unspoken truce having settled between them. Frank's red hat was no longer on the table. He'd left it in his truck. Marcus no longer spoke with the weary bitterness he'd carried for so long. They were just two old soldiers, back on mission. The front door opened, and a young man stood hesitantly in the doorway. He was thin, with the haunted, thousand-yard stare that they both knew so well. It was Leo Pineda, the young veteran Marcus had worried about. "Is the coffee on?" Leo asked quietly. "Always, son. Come on in," Frank said, getting up to pour a cup. Leo walked over to the table where Marcus was sitting. He pulled out a chair. I saw you guys on the news," he said, looking at his hands. "The first time, and then the follow-up. About the donation and the call." Down. He looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes. "I figured," he said, "if you two could sort your stuff out for this place, maybe it was a place I could come to sort my own stuff out." Marcus looked over at Frank, who was walking back with the coffee. Their eyes met over the young veteran's head. In that single, shared glance, the entire story came to a close. The political arguments, the viral fame, the intervention of presidents, had all boiled down to this one moment. A young man who needed a place to land had found one. Their mission was intact. Does putting our shared duty to each other above our political divisions seem possible anymore? Or was this just a fairy tale? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that go beyond the headlines.